Governor Ducey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. We love it when governors come to Washington, D.C. as Reaganism, and really stands for the proposition that the state should lead, the people should lead, and not everything has to come out of Washington. But it gives us a good opportunity when the governors do come here to talk about what's going on outside of Washington, D.C. Let's just start with your background, of course, elected in 2014, re-elected in 2018, in a state that perhaps was a red state before, but the composition has changed and it's more competitive for Republicans to get elected. Looking out to 2022, 2023, what do Republicans seeking public office in Arizona see when it comes to the party profile of the state?
Well, I want to say first, I think that Arizona still is a red state. It's a center-right state. We had the wind at our back in 2014, and we won by 12 points. We had the wind in our face in 2018. It was a tough year for Republicans, and we won by a larger margin, and we actually took 44% of the Hispanic vote against an opponent named David Garcia. So I do think these principles of opportunity for all, a growing economy, the ability to climb the economic ladder, and then the thing that states are in charge of, which is education for children, and Arizona leads in parental choice, that these are winning issues. They're kitchen table issues. They're issues you can get into any room in the state, any stripe or demographic, and make that case, because people do want to create a good life for themselves and their family, and they care about what their kids are learning inside these classrooms, and they're concerned about what's being told. And that's where I think we've built this majority coalition in Arizona. And as we head to 2022, I hope that the candidates see that this is a winning formula and that you want to play a game of addition versus subtraction.
Addition versus subtraction. We're going to get to education and civics. I know have been a big priority for you. Opportunity, obviously, is something that you've employed in trying to make kind of a signature set of policies out of Arizona. You came in with $1 billion budget deficit. Recently, you put through a tax package that reduced taxes in your state. Yet the deficit is under control. How did you do that, and where do things stand with respect to tax policy and spending in Arizona?
Well, first, we had a plan. We did come into office, and there was a $1 billion deficit, a sluggish economy, and the education system was mired in lawsuits. And we just completed the last legislative session. We have $1 billion in our rainy day fund. Our budget is balanced. We paid $2 billion in debt down, and we've got the lowest flat tax in the nation in Arizona at 2.5%. But it was that first year of tightening our belt and making the tough decisions. I came from the private sector. Cold Stone Creamery, the ice cream company, was my business, and I'd been through boom years and bust years, and we always had a expected budget, an optimistic budget, and a pessimistic budget, a worst-case scenario. And I knew that if I could balance that budget in that first year, that our economy would begin to grow and heal. And if it didn't begin to grow, we'd be happy that we balanced the budget, because we'd have our spending under control. So it was an imperative. It was the shortest legislative session in Arizona history. I've met with every legislator. I said, I want to know what's on your mind and let you know that I can't be helpful with any of it in this session, because we've got to balance the budget. But I'm hopeful that as we have available dollars going forward, we'll find things to work on.
And you made good on that. We'll talk about education in a second, but later on, you invested in public education, increased teacher pay 20% by 2020. So I guess those legislators, were happy that they made a deal with you. You met with every single member of the legislature?
I met with every single member that wanted to meet with me.
Okay.
There were some that were just not going to be on board, and but it was very much that sitting down. You know what's important to me: state of the state, the campaign, all of those things. I want to know what's important to you. I want to talk about what's possible, but also make sure you're aware of the reality of our current situation. and the problem that we have to solve, and I ran on balancing the budget. So you really do need to take advantage of that.
Is that a winning platform, balancing the budget? It makes sense in terms of what you need to make a successful economy, right? An economy that works. But to a voter, I mean, what's happening in Washington, you don't talk about balancing the budget right now. It's all about how much can we spend to give some demographic, some citizen, a new entitlement. How is that a winning
Well, first I want to say
platform?
it's not the only part of the platform.
Okay.
The platform's got to be a little bit larger than that. But I think everybody knows you have to live within your means. I mean, this idea of not spending more than you bring in is pretty simple. Every small business owner, every family, everybody out there in the real economy has to live under those rules. Why doesn't government? So I found as part of a larger package, the idea of being responsible, of spending less than we bring in is something that made sense, and we were actually able to bring it to life.
Let's go back to one thing you said about the election, your election in 2014, and then, of course, in 2018 as well. But the Hispanic vote, that got a lot of attention in 2020, that the Republicans did better with the Hispanic community than they had in the past, although still not commanding majorities or even plurality. But the numbers were going up. Was that a focus of your campaign? What do you see and what have you learned in Arizona where you've heard other commentators say is that Republicans need to make sure they're focusing on that community because Democrats may be taking that community for granted?
Republicans, conservatives should not play identity politics. We won't be any good at it. So people should be our priority. Each community should be our priority. And what I really found getting outside of the traditional Republican rooms, which of course I spent plenty of time inside them, is that our message on tightening our belt, making decisions, providing opportunity, and making sure your kids are getting an education of value for the seat time inside the classroom is there's no demographic that doesn't embrace that message. That's something that I think every candidate across the country should do. And I know in many of these settings, people had never heard anyone who was running for office. They'd never seen a political speaker. And I think that's a great opportunity to ask for people's votes and to answer the tough questions. And I think it's part of getting in the room, going where you're not necessarily comfortable and making the case.
We've heard others say that. You have to engage with those communities, and just because it hasn't been the path, chosen before by previous office holders, those seeking office, you got to get in that community because the agenda will appeal to them regardless of, whether they self-identify as Republican or conservative.
My experience is going into those rooms is you get a lot of credit just for showing up. Just for being there. And then if you can make the case, if you can answer the tough questions, you're going to win some votes, you're going to change some minds and some hearts, and that's really the business we're in.
Let's shift a bit, but this is all grounded in opportunity. Whether you're from a Hispanic community or any other community, you want to be in a community, in a state where there's opportunity for growth to enhance your station in life. You've gotten a lot of national attention in Arizona for your work with the semiconductor sector. That's for a couple of reasons. One, with supply chain shortages that we're experiencing due to the global pandemic and because of the conduct of China and what's going on in Asia, we're all realizing those little semiconductors control everything we rely on in life, from our cars to our iPhones. Intel announced a $20 billion expansion of its manufacturing operations in Arizona. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. That's a mouthful, but that is the world's largest premier semiconductor manufacturing company. These are high-tech industries, high-tech jobs. They're all coming to Arizona. In the case of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, it's a $12 billion investment. What is going on in Arizona that you're the hub for semiconductors and going to save the United States from reliance on kind of an international supply chain that clearly could put us at risk?
Well, thanks, Roger. We've got even more in the pipeline, and I'm much more comfortable talking to a chief executive, a business owner, or decision maker, oftentimes than I am talking to a legislator.
There were semiconductors in Coastal and Creamery? Is that what it is?
Well, I think I know what motivates a business person. I know what's important to them. When I ran for office, I had support from the business community, and a lot of people said, oh, I love Arizona. It's great. I'm going to stay here and retire here. But my son or daughter who just graduated from you name the college, they can't find a career or apply their degree here. Well, it's been 5 years since I've heard that. We have more jobs available than we have people to fill them. These are high-tech, high-paying jobs with a thriving service community. And one time, governors are pretty collegial, and we were all sitting around a table together at one of the National Governor Association meetings, and the governor from Oregon said, where do you go to do economic development? And, one person at that time, this is several years ago, said China. Somebody else said Taiwan. Someone else said the UAE. When it came to me, I said, I go to California for economic development. And we literally sat down with companies that weren't going to scale businesses there anymore, didn't like the high tax, high regulation, unwelcoming feel. And today they are in Arizona and they're thriving.
So you hit on a few things there. Obviously, a lot of national coverage of companies that are relocating out of California because of the tax burden, because of the regulatory burden. In the semiconductor space, you have the federal government right now saying, hey, we need manufacturing in the United States. We can't be reliant on international supply chain, particularly one in the case of Taiwan that's so close to China. Yes. That's our competitor, perhaps, really could put us at economic risk. Workforce challenge. You need to have a highly skilled workforce. Regulatory burden, tax burden. Take us through what you have to kind of do, what the recipe is in your state to make it attractive, not only for an Intel that already had a bit of a footprint, but to a Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company, right, where their hub is out in Taiwan. Is it just give them these incentives alone? What are they? How do you get the deal done?
Well, we look at it like this: it's opportunity for all, special favors for none. And on the workforce side, one, we do have an incredibly talented workforce in Arizona, but we're also blessed with some excellent universities in Arizona State University and the University of Arizona, led by Michael Crow and Bobby Robbins, respectively. NAU's doing a very good job as well. And then using your community colleges, which can really adjust curriculum to address that workforce as they're coming up. And then Arizona is one of the #1 net in-migration states in the country. So it really is a supply-side principle, this idea that once you win the company, they will come, people will come.
Supply side, so Reagan-esque, or if you build it, they will come approach. And you're talking about workforce in particular right now, that people relocate.
I'm talking about workforce, which I think that is first and foremost. You have to have the talent. You have to have the pipeline of talent. We have an overused word, but it's true now in Arizona, this ecosystem of what is happening in the semiconductor community. And you addressed very much how important these things are, from everything under the sun, from your car to your washing machine to your kitchen appliances. And there's a shortage of them. So the Taiwan semiconductor, the Intel investment, these are all real validators that Arizona is a great place to work, build and scale a business, get an education, and raise a family.
Let's drill down on that a little bit more. The Arizona Commerce Authority announced the formation of a national semiconductor economic roadmap. I went online and watched the promotional video, tried to kind of understand exactly what this was. It highlighted all the elements that we were just discussing: regulatory burden, tax policy, workforce. What's interesting, and I couldn't quite conclude from watching the video and reading the material, was where is it in terms of industrial policy? And by that I mean, and this is a debate in Washington, although maybe there's consensus for semiconductors, how much should government be involved in providing those incentives? And what is kind of the national semiconductor economic roadmap going to do? Like, how much are they asking the state to perhaps compromise, right, or make a special exception to get this done? And I know you're saying opportunity for all. I heard you a minute ago, But there seems to be, the public component really needs to be present and work at this, correct?
Well, I think it should be little to none in terms of the incentive package. I look at our Arizona Commerce Authority as the marketing arm of state government. CEOs make a decision based on a number of factors and metrics. Number one, nobody moves to a state where they do not want to live. So just having a great quality of life, great opportunities for your kids, cultural experiences, those types of things are first and foremost. And then, of course, they're going to run a spreadsheet on that, but there's a lot of other states where they could go where it would be less from a price perspective. It's the overall value proposition that I think that Arizona's been offering, and the fact that we've also been trying harder, that we're actually sitting at the table and assuring people that you'll have a better tax environment year over year, each year of the administration, and we've been able to deliver on that. We've actually eliminated 2,700 regulations in Arizona. That's the equivalent of a $150 million tax cut annually without costing the general fund $1. And I think it was the focus on those things, the ability to communicate that to leadership of a company and say, not only is this a great place for you to do business, but over the course of time, your senior management, your top talent will want to reside here.
How do you respond when Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, mouthful, TSMC is the easier way to say it.
We call them Taiwan Semi.
There we go, Taiwan Semi. Where they say, well, the Germans, they're giving us state subsidies. The Japan, whoever else, they all give these, they subsidize businesses. Arizona sounds great. It's a beautiful place to live and a great place to raise a family. But, are you at all hesitant that you can get across the finish line because they're used to subsidization from the state?
We don't get into bidding wars. I was trained at Procter & Gamble. Business that's won on price will be lost on price. Now, I know that our federal government worked with Taiwan Semi on that, and I think they were doing that from a defense perspective.
A national security standpoint, yes.
And so that's a different story. But from a state perspective, we have some things in statute. But whenever it gets into that bidding war, we say you're likely going to go elsewhere. We want you to make the right decision for Arizona long term. And you can look at our record from the companies that you just listed off, and along with Lusa and Nikola and Electromechanica. I could go on and on this. I think we've won more than our lion's share of businesses. And what I find, it is the New York states of the world that are normally hanging out a large cash incentive in some of these things. We say we can't participate. But the other states that have been our toughest competition have been places like Texas,
right,
Tennessee, and Florida. And if you look at these states along with Arizona, you see great places to live, low taxes, light regulation, and the government is going to stay out of your way as an entrepreneur.
And workforce. And the Reagan Institute is running a task force right now on U.S. manufacturing competitiveness and national security. We have former chair and CEO of Lockheed Martin, Marilyn Houston, as a co-chair, and Dave McCormick, CEO of Bridgewater. Their work on this task force has really pointed to workforce as being the number one challenge. You hit on it before. You have great universities and community colleges, and you get people coming in who are trained from elsewhere. Are you at all concerned that that's going to be the long pole in the tent for delivering the manufacturing jobs that are needed to sustain, the building going on with semiconductors in Arizona?
Well, I hope it is, because that's the one that you can solve. When you can say to people, hey, we've got great jobs available, from the construction of Intel's 100,000 square foot fabs that they're going to build one after another, to the fact that people can go to school, get engineering degrees, get accreditations, do these types of internships and apprenticeships, and then have a high-paying job and long-term security in their community. That's a problem that's very solvable, and that's not only great for Arizonans, that's great for people that want to move to the state of Arizona. Arizona is a state, 72% of our adults were born somewhere else.
Including you.
Including me.
Toledo, Ohio, right?
Toledo, Ohio, and it's a very welcoming and inviting place.
Let's move on. A big priority for you, you've led on, is civics education. In 2015, Arizona became the first state in the nation to pass the American Civics Act, requiring students to pass a civics test. Take a minute just to explain that. It sounds like, wow, why did it take till 2015 to give civic, to require civic hygiene?
Well, I think we're all concerned about what's happening in our schools, the lack of knowledge of our country and our history and our values that our young people have. And it's basically just stopped being taught in so many places. Somehow, some way, it became controversial. And I was actually invited to an event along the campaign trail where Charles Krauthammer, may he rest in peace, and Richard Dreyfuss were at the same event. And they conducted a debate. Krauthammer representing the right.
I was like, not obvious bedfellows there.
Dreyfuss the left. And at the end, they said the only thing that the two of them agree on are American civics, our foundational documents, and the Federalist Papers. Now, they interpret them differently, but they have the argument, the debate, and the discussion. And like Margaret Thatcher said, win the argument, then win the vote. So it was at that dinner that I the next day went out on the trail and said, if I'm elected governor, Arizona kids are going to learn American history and civics. And basically what our kids are doing in Arizona, the same test that a newly naturalized legal American takes is now the test that our kids have to pass before they can graduate high school. It's one small step. It's 100 questions. You'd get 98 out of 100 without looking at it because you were raised this way. It was part of every curriculum and subject that you took. But now we have the Sandra Day O'Connor Civic Celebration Day. That's a full day, all day, in every school committed to civics. We think there's a lot more that we can do on that. Now 36 other states have followed suit, and we want to continue to address it. 36 states followed you. That, as a governor, you got to feel good about that. I'm wondering why there are about 14 who haven't figured it out yet, but I'm hopeful that they follow. I want to stay on this for a second because out of the Reagan Library, and we've discussed this on the show before, we're running something called the Time for Choosing series. And we've had a number of colleagues of yours, like you, leading voices in the conservative movement and the Republican Party. And almost all of them, I think every single speaker, from Paul Ryan to Mike Pompeo to Nikki Haley recently and others, former Vice President Mike Pence too, they all are hitting on this issue of restoring American pride, making sure the educational system is teaching our students how to look at our country's history and past in a positive light, at the same time being honest about our past too, and to strive for a more perfect union. Let me ask you, Nikki Haley said the following in her speech recently. She said that Democrats and those on the left have adopted an anti-American worldview, and she used a very interesting device. She quoted a speech by President Obama shortly after he took office, which she said that no Democrat would say today, where effectively President Obama said there's no white American or black American, right? It's the United States of America. And she stood for the proposition that conservatives and Republicans are the only one who would say that today. How do you get at this issue? Clearly, civics has been your priority. We just discussed it. Is this really a difference between the parties all the way down to state level? Is that what you're seeing in Arizona? Unfortunately, it is a difference between the parties. It's rather new. We just celebrated Columbus Day in the country, and I don't know if you saw the proclamation that the Obama administration put out in the 2008 or 2009 around Columbus Day. You wouldn't see that out of a Democratic administration today. The fact that they flew the founding flag, what we call the Betsy Ross flag, and now that's been co-opted where companies call it a racist symbol. Somewhere something's gone wrong. So I think that Ambassador Haley touches on something that we are seeing at the state level, although I do think the majority of Americans know that we have an incredible history and that we can tell it, and we can tell it factually. Yeah, you said before, as I was laying out the question ineloquently and too long, that we could do both. What do you mean by that? That we can talk about our history. We can talk about this upward climb. We can talk about this search for a more perfect union and the greatness of our founders with all of their flaws, and how the world was in 1776 and the 18th century, and the ideas that inspired them, and then the improvement that we've made decade over decade. We are a very, very young country at 245, 246 years, and how we've changed the world, how we've been a beacon of hope and light, and the fact that people flock to our shores and thrive inside our states is a result of that history, as flawed as it has been. So I think we can tell both sides of it, and as we've seen the issues like slavery, like inequality with the vote, we've addressed those along the way. I know there's more to do, but I think we should celebrate a lot of the great things that have happened and the example that we've been for other nations around the world.
And the system, those founding values and the Constitution that they constructed allows us to become a more perfect union. I mean, I think that to me is a point that really resonates and so we should embrace that system because it allows for progress.
I think George Will said that elected leaders come and go, but it's the Constitution and the American creed that are eternal, and that's what need to be protected.
Now, of course, your perspective is not limited to Arizona these days. You are lead the Republican Governors Association. You're chair of that association. Of course, the RGA as organizes the Republican governors. There are, I believe, 27. So the majority of the governors in this country are Republican. Election coming up. Part of the role there is to make sure Republican governors get reelected and elected. How's it looking?
Well, I think it's going to be a very good year for Republicans. Like you said, we have 27 Republican governors today. We're the only Republican conference in the country. I don't think there's ever been
to explain that. You're the only Republican conference in the country. That's a way of saying Republicans don't have majorities anyplace else and at the federal level.
But we have a majority as governors.
Oh, right.
And I don't think there's ever been a greater contrast between Republican governance and Democrat governance than through the pandemic. If it weren't for Republican governors, the country would have been shut down. But Republican governors showed that you could protect lives and livelihoods across this nation, that we could get kids inside of schools, that we could get teachers vaccinated, and we could catch our kids up. So we have 38 governors' races across the nation. These are our toughest and most competitive states, places like Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Texas, even Arizona is on the map. And we think we have real pickup opportunities as well in places like Maine, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kansas, and New Mexico. And the Republican Governors Association is to find the best possible candidates and then to get them over the finish line.
Lives and livelihood. And yes. This is what Republican governors did during the pandemic, getting students into school, but also doing it in a safe way. Is that going to be top of mind for the voters, do you think, in November?
Well, we believe so. We think that many people were crushed through the decisions of the left and the closet authoritarianism.
Closet authoritarianism. Is this kind of freedom, not Fauciism, is what you hear in some states? I mean, what do you mean?
Well, I just think you want to look at the different states, I mean, and how the media, the left, and the Democratic Party combined on this messaging that somehow lockdown was leadership. And it was rejected by the people inside the states. We saw that it didn't work. And people that brought a more balanced and targeted approach with our values and our rights at the forefront saw that they could manage it in a better, more effective way, serve the citizen and protect the community.
Serve the citizen, protect the community. And there was kind of reinforced a very important conservative mindset or outlook, which is lead locally, right? Tailor it for the communities. And with the pandemic, that's the case, kind of mandating it from on high. In Washington is often, when it comes to public health, not the way to go about it because every community is different. The numbers are changing. Everything is really dependent on an area.
Well, it's straight out of Reagan's first inaugural, right?
Yeah.
This idea that the states are there for a reason.
Yeah. Which race do you think is kind of a pickup opportunity, you think, kind of in the mindset where it's a democratically, kind of majority or one that people would assume would go Democratic?
Well, we have Paul LePage, who's going to run again in Maine. We think we can win there. We think Gretchen Whitmer is going to pay heavy consequences for her behavior and hypocrite hypocritical behavior in Michigan. Kansas is a red state, and we're going to make it red again. And we think New Mexico is very vulnerable as well. We think all four of those are real pickup opportunities, and I would add Wisconsin as well.
Okay, great. Wisconsin, too. Of course, you hear Wisconsin, you think about not just 2022, but a critical state in 2024. How much should we look at 2022 as an indicator of where the country is for 2024?
Well, first, I'd say let's just look at 2022.
Okay,
I think it's very important that we focus on what's in front of us.
We're sitting here in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
It's always a presidential election year.
And the best thing we can do is bring a record of accomplishment and achievement and then success in 2022 to lay the groundwork for 2024. And the other thing I'd point out in many ways is we've proven as Republicans that we can win the governor's race in any state. We have Republican governors in Massachusetts, Maryland. There's a Republican governor in Bernie Sanders, Vermont. Is a Republican. And if you remember in 2009, it was kind of a shot heard around the world. Republican governors won in New Jersey with Chris Christie and Bob McDonnell in Virginia. Mm-hmm. We've got a great candidate in Glenn Youngkin in Virginia right now. We're very hopeful that he can get over the finish line against Terry McAuliffe. Jack Ciattarelli is closing the gap against Phil Murphy. But I think that focus on the ideas that they have and, Glenn's running on how the state of Virginia was run during the pandemic.
Right.
And you're seeing what's happened in Loudoun County and some of these counties that were renowned for their academic excellence. And they've been very hesitant to get kids back into the classroom. And it seems like the school boards are more concerned about social issues, more concerned about masks than math. And
more concerned about masks than math. I mean, in the D.C. area, so we're seeing all these commercials, and there's no question that Youngkin's emphasizing education and having parent involvement in education. But tough race, right?
It's going to be a tough race. Virginia's turned out to be a tough state, Northern Virginia specifically. But this is why you play the game, right? This is let's let the people vote. Let's Glenn Youngkin make his case. People are seeing what Terry McAuliffe is saying during these debates, and the fact that he doesn't think parents should have a say in their children's education. One is a real spark for school choice, and two, it could turn the state of Virginia around with new leadership in Glenn Youngkin.
Yeah, that's getting a lot of attention. We have a couple minutes left before we get to the lightning round. I do want to get you to weigh in on border security and immigration. It's an issue once again, a major issue, a security issue. Arizona, of course, a border state. You went down to the border with a bunch of other governors, called out the Biden administration, had a 10-point plan you're advocating for. Where are we right now with this border crisis, and what are the kind of one or two or three things, if you could go across the street here from the Reagan Institute over to the White House, make that walk to Lafayette Park, and just convince President Biden to do one or two or three things, what would they be?
This is the third president I've served alongside, and by far the worst. Even Barack Obama deployed the National Guard to the border. Under President Trump, he deployed the National Guard, and my fellow governor, Jerry Brown in California, complied and put the National Guard at the border. This is not illegal immigration right now, Roger. This is mass migration, and it's all illegal. President Biden has given a symbol to Mexico and South America that our borders are open and this dangerous travel will be rewarded. It's the drug cartels that are shaping the policy. Myself and Governor Abbott in Texas have deployed the National Guard with state taxpayer dollars to the border, but it's like a balloon. If we can slow the tide at our borders, they're going to New Mexico,
the Guard
California.
will make an impact.
The Guard will make an impact. Law enforcement will make an impact. The Border Strike Force will make an impact. We'll continue to invest in stopping human trafficking, drug trafficking, and child sex trafficking. But this is a federal responsibility. President Biden, Kamala Harris are ignoring it, and so is Secretary Mayorkas.
Why? How do you explain it?
Well, they both raised their hand during the first Democratic debate and said that anyone that comes over the border illegally will receive free health care. Lopez Obrador, the president of Mexico, has called Joe Biden the migrant president. This is a problem that can be solved. It has been solved before. It was largely solved in the previous administration. I can't explain why they are ignoring it because there's nothing humanitarian about it. You see these stories of these young girls, 51% of are experience violence or sexual assault on this journey, and it is traffickers that are taking advantage of them, in addition to the fact that we don't know the people that we're not catching. We've apprehended 1.5 million people. That's larger than 9 American states. It's the people that we're not apprehending. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what kind of malintent that they have. And then we see these families that use their life savings to be exploited by the cartels.
Just we'll wrap up with this and go to lightning round, but it's interesting just listening to the way you're framing it. This is not against lawful migration. This is concern not just about illegal immigration, but also that this is a humanitarian concern.
This is not immigration, and I don't think we should confuse the two. This is border security, which is national security. We talked about that, bad actors, but it's also public safety. This fentanyl and methamphetamine that we see in every large city, every school in our country, this is coming over the southern border. Then there's the humanitarian part of it. And last I was told, we're in the middle of a public health crisis. These people are coming across the border. They're not tested. They're not vaccinated. It's very hypocritical on behalf of the administration, and it needs to be addressed. The governors will continue to do this, and we had 26 Republican governors sign on to this. Because when I ran in 2014, border security was a state issue for the 4 border states. Right. This is now a national issue, and you can see the impact.
Let's go to the lightning round. This is where we ask all our guests to share with us their favorite Reagan book, favorite Reagan speech, favorite Reagan quote. We'll take all through 3, 2, or just one. What do you want to share with us, Governor?
Well, I would say in terms of favorite Reagan book, it'd be Reagan in his own words, or Peggy Noonan's When Character Was King. I love both of those. Asking about Reagan's favorite speech, it'd be better if you asked which decade. Okay. But I will say, for me, it's time for choosing. I think it's got a special place in every Arizonan's heart because that was in support of Barry Goldwater in 1964. And in Arizona, we say Barry Goldwater didn't lose that election. It just took 16 years
You had to wait till
to count the vote. And Reagan brought that conscience of a conservative to life. And then the last one was book quote. I would say I love what he says in the first inaugural, that the federal government didn't create the states. It's the states that created the federal government. I do think we miss a big opportunity, and I say this as a governor, and of course Ronald Reagan was a successful governor, that if we push these things out to the laboratory of democracy, governors are collaborative, they're collegial, but at the end of the day, we're competitive. We would want to solve these problems, and we could take these dollars and I think be much more innovative in a way that's not top-down, one-size-fits-all, addresses our own local communities, and then good ideas like American Civics, like universal licensing, like telehealth that's available throughout the state. Other governors take these ideas and apply them in their state, sometimes with attribution, sometimes without, but it's good for the people of the country, and it also has them more involved in their local government and their state government, and they can make that positive impact.
A perfect quote for our governor. Governor Ducey, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Roger. It's good.